All right. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a special HashiCorp Blacksmiths Fireside Chat webinar. Just want to talk about quick community guidelines. Just want to talk about that first. Please be welcoming, inclusive, friendly, and patient at all times. Be considerate, be respectful, be professional. More information is on our website, hashicorp.com/community-guidelines. And just want to first talk about HashiCorp. We are the leading provider of multi-cloud infrastructure automation software, and also represented is the Blacksmiths, an employee resource group within HashiCorp. And our mission is to provide a community of support within HashiCorp and for employees of African ancestry throughout the whole employment process, and that's from recruiting, interviewing, retention to advancement. And I'm very pleased to have our very own Sam Terrell, our Regional VP of Strategic Enterprise Sales, who covers the Northeast, and also our special guest, Will Hayes, previous leadership positions over at Splunk, at Lucidworks, where he was CEO, and now co-founder over at Bestomer most recently. And they'll talk about, I think, just sharing some personal experiences, Will's journey into tech leadership, what keeps them motivated, and also, let's be honest, managing through adversity is a challenging time right now in tech, and talking through that and much more. With that, I'll pass it over to Sam.
Hey, thanks a lot, Frank. Appreciate that. And thank you so much, Will, for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this since Frank first mentioned that we might have an opportunity to talk to you.
Likewise. Yeah, it was like, 3 months ago or something. Like it's been a little while.
And it felt like this day would never come.
Right.
I'm super stoked, super excited about this opportunity to talk to you. Looking back over your career, and you're just getting started. You've had an amazing journey thus far, right? And I thought it'd be an awesome opportunity for us to just talk to you about, where you started, and where your journey has taken you to present day in time. And I know you started, as an analyst, a programmer analyst, and made your way to Splunk. Some amazing time there through an amazing IPO journey. Ended up as I shouldn't say ended up there, but you made it to the ranks of a CEO and president at Lucidworks. So if you could just share a little bit about where you started and how you came to this point in your career.
Sure thing. So I'll go way back for a moment. So I grew up in the Bay Area. So I grew up in El Sobrante, California, right kind of in the border of Richmond. So if you're familiar, kind of East Bay, I always tell people, Oakland, okay, keep going. Berkeley, yep, nope, keep going. We're right there before the Carquinez Bridge. And so I had an opportunity to grow up in the Bay, rich diversity, cultural diversity, economic diversity. I think it really kind of shaped a lot of my perspective. What's really interesting about that experience is the dichotomy between growing up in the Bay and then all of the opportunity that's sort of happening in the Bay. And so there's a big disconnect, and I'm sure we'll sort of get into that. But from my background, one of the things I was really fortunate of is I had access. And so in my house, I had a computer. I grew up in the 80s, right? So this isn't like today where more people are online and mobile devices. My dad was an engineer. He was a programmer, which meant I had access to a computer, had access to the internet, which was really rare at the time. And immediately for me, it was this space that was so obtainable, right? Everything I wanted to learn, everything I wanted to see, it was right there. And I was so motivated by the ability to kind of take something that I had learned and applied it, right? To see it like right there on the screen. And so where it started with just like, oh, hey, I've got this computer, cool, let's play some games, right? I don't know if people, I'm kind of old, but like, Bruce Lee on the Commodore and sort of things like that. And then that opened up into like IRC and news groups and starting to connect with people all over the world. And that sort of fascinated me. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, I can manipulate these things. And, we built bots to like defend our chat rooms and things like that. And so just that ability to kind of self-learn and apply, it just always motivated me. And then also kind of growing up in the East Bay, I had a bit of that hustler mentality, right? So all of a sudden I started to see too, I was like, as the web and databases and kind of that initial digital transformation started to happen, it was like, well, I can go make some money. And so I started doing everything from like websites. I was offering database support. This is me as a teenager, right? And this was back again, now we're talking like mid 90s where this wasn't necessarily as pervasive as today, but people were starting to become aware. My business needs to get online. My business needs to be run by systems, right? And so the final piece of that was in high school, I was exposed to an organization called Inroads. This is a specialized group that focuses on Black and Latino kids, primarily kind of in lower income areas, and gets them kind of exposure to the corporate world. It starts with like doing some job shadowing, career fairs. Really for a high school age student, it was really about that exposure, starting to do like resume building and interview building. But lo and behold, when I had an opportunity to go to the career fair as a high schooler just to observe, I found an opportunity with Genentech where they were really desperate to start transforming desktop applications to web applications. And that was something I knew how to do. And so through that, I was able to get an internship. And through that, I was able to actually stay on as I went to school as a contractor, came back as a programmer, as you mentioned, as a programmer analyst, spent about 6 years there, and then had the opportunity to join a startup that was really small, had a really funky name, and no one really understood what they were doing. But a couple of my friends were there, and my calculus, VCs always ask me like, oh my gosh, you joined Splunk in 2005. Like, what did you know about analytics and data? Like, what did you see? I'm like, bro, like they had an Xbox. It was right near my house, and my car was dying. And so I was like, well, I could sell my car or get rid of my car, and I could start taking the bus to work. And so that was really the calculus. But at the time, it was probably one of the most important transitions for me, because as much as I had this mentality growing up, and I've had this sort of hustler side of me that was just like, go after it. I didn't have a lot of exposure, right? Genentech was a great place. It was very safe for me, very supportive for me. I didn't finish college, and so they gave me an opportunity when I decided to leave school to come work there. But as far as exposure to the industry, and that's where Splunk, I say Genentech gave me kind of my BA, Splunk gave me my master's, right? We went from 9 people to an IPO and beyond, from the first sale to the first $200-300 million in revenue. Got to travel the world, got to launch new markets, got to do so many amazing things. And for me, who's just like a lifelong learner and somebody who's just incredibly curious, they just kept firing the fire hose at me, And I'm grateful for that experience, primarily because, and we'll talk about this, I believe in believing in yourself,
Yep.
but you don't get a chance to see the movie very often, right? Mm-hmm. And as I've gotten older and I've met execs and even people I look up to, I realize, wow, I have some very unique experiences because of that movie I got to watch. And not everybody has that opportunity. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Obviously, it took a lot of execution and hard work, my part and others' parts. But let's face it, right? I mean, this industry, it's tough. Product market fit is tough just because you have an idea. Yeah. There's no guaranteed success. And so when you get an opportunity to see something evolve, just like what you all are going through at HashiCorp, right? You really want to embrace that, because there's never a guarantee that the next one is going to have the same story, right?
Wow, I love that. There are so many things and so many places to go with what you just said there. I heard a couple things that you spoke to, right? You had opportunity, right? That was key through the Inroads process that gave you a certain level of access, right? You had a love of learning, so you weren't afraid to step into new areas that maybe weren't as familiar to you, maybe stepping into the corporate world. And then the other thing that I really heard in that, which I don't know if everyone picks up on that, you had a level of grit and hustle within you that was just bred out of the environment that you were in, right? You had ambition, right?
And if I can add to that, I think the grit and the hustle is good. I think the thing that I appreciate, and we'll get into this with adversity, is I had a sense of awe, right? And I think this is something that people who don't necessarily come from this world where, your parents weren't in corporate America, you didn't have a lot of exposure, we tend to be a little bit shy about this sense of awe. But the truth is, the sense of awe is what makes you open. You can absorb so much, right? I remember just sitting in rooms at Genentech, I can't believe I'm in this room. I can't believe they're serving lunch. I can't believe they gave me a laptop. And I was 18 years old. And so it was a big deal to me. And again, where I grew up, like that wasn't a very common work experience. But as I learned, as I got older, it's always embrace that wonder, always be excited to be in the room. And even as I'd been a CEO for 10 years, there were always moments where I'd always just take a moment and say, look, just look around. Like, this is cool. Like you're doing this right now, and appreciate that. And I just think that some folks see adversity as being something that's kind of a disadvantage. I've always seen that as an advantage, that like, I'm just like this kid in a candy store. You can't throw any work at me that I don't want to do, that I don't enjoy doing. And it's an advantage, because for the folks that don't, we tend to work a little bit harder. We tend to get more done, and we tend to create more opportunity for ourselves when we have that desire to just be in the room,
Yeah. So one of the things I want to just key in on, I don't want to get us off track, but you did say something that I think a lot of people, when you have these kinds of opportunities, you might have to face, right? Which is, and I talk to folks about this, I experience it myself, the feeling of they call it, it's more popularly termed now, imposter syndrome, right?
Totally.
When you get, and we can define that or describe that as, you're in an opportunity, you look around the room and all of a sudden you feel like you're the only one that doesn't belong there, right? And you undervalue the work that you might have put in or what you had to go through to be in that room, right? And so I wondered if you could kind of talk about that and how you dealt with that in the earlier part of your career.
Yeah. Real quick, you're hearing me, right? I had to change my mic thinking, so I just decided to take it out.
Much better. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, right? Having gone through my experience, I wouldn't have changed anything, right? I think everything that I had experienced, everything that I had faced, everything that I had to kind of either overcome, and including, by the way, the great support and people around me that really elevated and really lifted me, right? And I say that because I, in reflection now, doing this, 22 plus years, can reflect on how much of that has shaped me into the person I am today and how much I appreciate who I am today. And so that, though, I will say with the caveat, it took me a while to get there, right? There were times and countless times and through every transition, right? First, there's just like, I showed up, I'm 18 years old, I'm at Genentech. Now, luckily I'm 18, so I don't have as much awareness. I look back now and I cringe at some of the things that I would have said or done, but my saving grace was always being technical, right? I could always solve whatever technical problem. And so even if I put my foot in my mouth, like I knew that I could go back and get the work done, but being young, I just felt out of place no matter what, right? I was half the age of most of the people there. I had a different background than most of the people there. But again, I sort of had that ignorance that I didn't quite know. I didn't have the self-awareness. Getting into my 20s and getting into like Splunk, and especially as I start getting into like customer situations and things like that, it definitely starts to elevate for you. You start to feel this discomfort. You start to notice little things, right? We call these microaggressions today. And again, I don't necessarily consider these things to be nefarious in nature, but they happen, and they happen all the time. And people like you and I have learned to just kind of almost like tune those out. Mm-hmm. But they do wear you. I always call it like the pebble in the shoe, right? Like over time, it's going to start to wear you out. For me personally, and I don't mean this as any kind of advice, the crutch that I always leaned on was back to being effectively more informed than anybody else in the room. I knew more about the technology. I knew more about the products. I knew more about the business, the competitors. And anytime I used to have that feeling, I remember I'd go and like absorb more, and that was kind of my personal defense mechanism. And I remember like, look, I was young, right? I used to party. We used to go out and do stuff and whatever, you'd be all like groggy that morning. And I remember the way I get over anything I felt guilty. I was like, work hard, just work hard. But that has definitely helped me. And in my career, it's funny, as I became a CEO and I got into the position where like maybe I could relax a little bit more, right? That is what became my key differentiator, right? There wasn't a conversation that I couldn't have with engineering or with customers. And it was always funny to me because people didn't expect it, right? They were always kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about that for? And I was like, well, shit, like, how do you think I got in this room? And so again, I think just like being confident in the things that you control. I can't control other people's perceptions. I can't control the way they change their tone when I enter the room. I can't control the things that they might say and wish they didn't say and then create an uncomfortable situation. But I can control my own presence, and I can control what I understand about the business and what I wield as far as knowledge. And that builds confidence, because as you start to see, there's a lot of imposters out there. It's not just us, right? We have a different perspective. And we'll get into this later, but I've learned to even grow empathy for others who somehow fit the bill of central casting, where those expectations are sort of baked into their identity. And there's part of me that can really feel for somebody like that. That's a lot of pressure. Everything I do is unexpected. So I love it and I appreciate it, but like, I don't have a lot of pressure. I've already exceeded every expectation of my childhood teachers and parents. And, so this is all just like living in the surplus. I feel for somebody who feels like if they don't succeed at every turn, they somehow failed. Because that's a burden, just like others have burdens. That's a burden in itself.
You're right. That's a huge burden. And I love the gem that you dropped. It's like you lose. I use a lot of sports metaphors, and that's a deficiency of mine, particularly talking to like international audiences, right? Because they don't understand some of the basketball references I make. But it's like it's akin to Michael Jordan missing the shot, or Kobe Bryant, missing that game-winning shot, and then right after that game, he's back in his home gym working out till 3 or 4 in the morning, right? It just makes you stronger, right? You develop kind of this response to that stimuli that when you come up short, you go back and you work harder so that when you're in that position again, you're not at a disadvantage, you're at an advantage.
I love that analogy, and I will say it's funny. I run into the same trap with the sports thing as well. But the other piece of that, though, which we can all relate to, is it's a game, right? I mean, this is something that has also fueled me throughout all of this. It's like I'm just competing, and at the end of the day, it matters, but it doesn't matter. And when you can go to work just like you're going to the gym, right? And like you said, you're trying to work on that shot. You're trying to improve your cardio. You're trying to just get a few more weights on the bench press, right? Like all of that training is safe because there's really, unless you are Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, there might be some implications. And so to the extent that even within your career, you're gaming it, right? I'm here to just be the best athlete that I can be. And, I've had the opportunity now to do a lot of like CEO coaching and consulting kind of in my transition period. And that's one of the things I realized with leaders is that they need to start looking at themselves like athletes. And what that means is you got to be healthy. You got to be conditioned. You've got to continuously be kind of pushing yourself and working on your weaknesses. And I think a lot of times we sort of lose that analogy a bit and it starts to affect us. And this goes to like, how are you eating and sleeping? And are you getting some exercise? And, all of those things are about you showing up as your best self.
That's right.
And so to the extent that we can train and kind of just continuously invest in ourselves career-wise, like it no question, you're going to see the return.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on something that we talked about, and then we're gonna do a little pivot and go back and transitioning into sales.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think this is good gems, right? Because this is all stuff that you can apply to wherever plot you are in life here. You talked about bringing your best self, right, to whatever it is that you're engaged in. You and I talked about this a little bit. I had a conversation with someone who had joined our organization, and he was talking about the fact that he had, not only, he was starting his career with us, but he also had 1 or 2 or 3 other side hustles that he was involved in. And I said, look, that's all fine and good, but what you're doing right now is a career. You can make, a lot of money doing it, but it's going to require every ounce of intellectual capital and energy that you have to optimize your opportunity here. And it was just the idea of, I told him, I said, one of the questions I asked him, I said, well, give me an idea. How much money did you make last year? And he said, well, I made about 40,000 last year. And I said, well, the average rep on my team is well into 6 figures, right? But they're putting everything, all of their intellectual capability into what they do. They're bringing their best selves to work every day. And he really took some time to think about that. I said, look, you can do 5 different things and be marginally decent at all of them.
Yeah.
Or you can choose one thing and be an outstanding superstar at it, right? And it's your choice to make. But my career shows, and the career of other successful people show that, look, you don't get there just spreading yourself across 5 different things. You got to put what you got into this because, that's what you have to bring to the table, right? So I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that, about bringing your healthy self and what you are into your
full focus.
Yeah,
funny. I've changed my narrative a little bit and just through again more conversations with people and more understanding. I think particularly in the younger generations, like the relationship to work is somewhat intentional. And I champion that, I celebrate that. But if I zoom out beyond like side hustles and whether you unplug at night or you take your PTO or not, I think the first thing that's most important is like what is your goal? What is your objective? Right? When you get in somewhere and you're like, look, I want to be the best seller. I want Sam's job one day. Sam, I want to do what you're doing one day, right? Or I want to be your top rep, or I want to make $500,000 a year. Like whatever that goal is, why are you doing this? I think getting clear with yourself on that. And by the way, it can be totally selfish. It can be totally super. I want to buy that new car. I want a fancy house. Like whatever that thing is, you don't have to share it. But when you understand that goal, then your relationship to the actions you take become very clear. So when I think about work, and I'll just give my own perspective, because like I said, I've had to evolve a bit just based on conversations with folks from various generations. But when I think about work, I saw this opportunity where I could come into an office every day. I could work on a computer all day and I could make a lot of money. And that blew my mind. because most people I knew did not have that opportunity. And a lot of people I knew really had to use their body in order to earn money. And you have limits to that, right? There are physical limitations to like how much you can actually work. And so when I saw that opportunity, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Right. This is how I want to earn my living and live my life. And then the other thing that happened, I started to see people get promoted. I remember just getting 18 years old. I was like, holy shit, every time that email goes out, someone's getting more money. Like I just started to get into this. And so for me, that relationship with work was that, wow, like of all the things I had seen in my life to date, there was a return on investment. I put more in, I get more back. And again, we can talk about biases and other challenges. And I have frames around those that I've learned to kind of take. But at its very core, what I put into work, I sort of got back. And so for me in my 20s, right, there wasn't a whole lot going on, right? I had my friends, I had my social life, I was dating, like whatever those things were. And so I was going to put everything that I had into my job, and I'd start to see that return. Now, a lot of people, again, as they're trying to manage that relationship to work and work-life balance, the only thing I'll say is that when you're younger and you have less priorities, right? When you start having families and partners and responsibilities, and again, a lot of people, especially people who have backgrounds similar to us, like they have to take care of family, they have other things that are important. So that's why I want to caveat a little bit. But to the extent that you can just invest in yourself and your career at this stage, why it's so important is because as more of those distractions start to come up later in your life, well, then you can take your foot off the gas a little bit. And so for anyone who's starting out, if your goal, if your ambition is that I want to be, again, I want to be top of the league, I want to be top of the game, I want to perform at my highest and best self, then I think having that commitment and that focus is key. As a manager, I can tell you that my attention and my investment, personal investment beyond just whatever my job is, will reflect what I see in terms of that grit and that desire, right? There's nothing more, rewarding than managing and supporting someone who wants it, right? Who wants it badly. Right. And so just as an aside, if you want to build support with those people around you, they're going to reflect on your commitment and your dedication. And I'll just to wrap this up, but like as far as the side hustle goes, again, I think that there are what motivates it, right? Again, if money is your motivation and then you're pursuing a job where you could earn money, I think we should maybe take a look at, well, what would it take for me to maximize my time and my revenue if I just focus, right? If there's something that like brings you joy, like I mentioned, like in my transition, I started doing some CEO coaching, right? I wasn't sure about it. I was like, I've been through a lot of coaching. I have a lot of tools. Let me go try this out. And what I realized was that, wow, as Bestomer was ramping and I'm shifting my energy now to just running the company and doing that, I do get joy and I get perspective and hearing what's going on in other companies, other industries, other types of challenges, and then applying my experience brings me some happiness. So what I realized, like, okay, I'm not doing this for money, but I do think I want to carve out some of my time to make sure that I'm still flexing that muscle and I'm still gaining that insight. Mm-hmm. And so again, there's an intention, there's an objective set. Right. So just always be intentional. And, just final thing, sorry, I'm kind of rambling here, but I do think as it comes to, and I don't know this individual, but for a lot of underrepresented folks, we tend to have a scarcity mentality, right? And that's okay, because again, I think that's grit, right? I think a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, a little bit of hustle it's really effective in this industry. What I think leaders can do though is we need to start to, just as you did in that perfect example of just educate. Look, if your goal is to make a lot of money, let me show you can make a lot of money selling software, and if your goal is to travel the world, let me show you how you can travel the world at HashiCorp and how you can do things, right? And if your goal is that I like to work on cars on the weekend, then let's make sure that you're doing that, because that's going to help you build energy and stay positive and, all of those kinds of things. So I think, again, just putting an intention on this and knowing why you're doing it, and then talking to people like yourself, just to make sure that you're getting all the insights that can help you make those decisions.
No, wise words. I love that. I want to maybe pivot a little bit. There's a lot going on in the space. First of all, you're embarking on a new venture with Bestomer. Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Park that at the end, along with some work that you're doing on the charitable foundation side and helping your community. But there's a lot happening in the macroeconomic environment right now. Yeah. Every other week you've been hearing about different tech companies laying folks off. I was talking to someone last week, and their question to me was, "Hey, is this actually a good time to even be in tech?" right? Should I get out of tech, right? I got 25 years worth of equity in this business. I think it's a little bit late for me to
let it ride
to go into real estate or anything else. So I'm still very bullish on our business. I mean, these are economic cycles. I grew up in the Midwest where, when we were going through, the industrial, revolution with cars and everything else, like Ford and GM and the big three, and was laying people off and left and right. That's where I grew up, right? So I know that these are part of the normal business cycle, but I guess just more fundamentally, what's your perspective here? What would you advise?
It's such a weird time,
should we even be here, right?
No, I know. And it's funny because I feel like my answer to that question changes like every 6 months, right? I'll go with my number one theme, which is I think now more than ever, being intentional is key. There was a moment, call it 10 plus years ago, where this STEM movement really took off. It's probably longer than that. My time is all skewed with COVID and everything. It's probably back in call it 05 to 08, right? Where this real focus, and a lot of Black folks in particular, and parents in particular, took this on as a huge burden. Oh my God, my kids got to get into STEM. And I remember kind of working through various organizations and just having exposure. And I started to realize this theme where there were some really brilliant and bright and curious kids. And guess what? They didn't like math. And I'm thinking to myself, so what? There's so many things that this kid has to offer to the world, and clearly has so much inspiration and so much energy. And I just, the idea that here's a parent that's really wanting to do the best for their child, and here's a child that's really thriving, to feel that they're missing something really kind of bummed me out. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, what is it about STEM and all of these things that are going on right now that are important? And then the world started changing, right? I'll tell you right now, what it's going to look like to be a developer is going to look very different in the next 5 years. There's no question. Forget about all these other industries like accounting and legal. And I mean, we could talk all day about where AI, but in terms of just breaking into tech, it's going to change. In some ways, it's going to lower the bar. In some ways, it's going to increase the output. In other cases, it's going to eliminate jobs, right? There's no question. So whether or not you think pursuing a software engineer as a means to build a big, wealthy lifestyle and all of those things, I mean, now more than ever, I would place that decision on whether or not that appeals to you. And again, 10 years ago, it might have been yeah, you should probably know a thing or two about coding. Remember, this was a really big deal. Well, guess what? There's low code platforms today that could build very sophisticated products. So I would just argue objectively, why should you need to know how to code that well? My joke is that I was always a hack of an engineer, right? But in terms of figuring out the business and everything else. And so I know I'm going a little bit all over the place, but I'll make this make sense, which is if you zoom out, two things about tech that I think people should really fundamentally understand. One, your desire to be technical needs to be a desire first and foremost. I have no doubt that as the world evolves, the ability for people to interface systems, design systems, implement workflows, will require nothing more than just knowing what you want the system to do. We've seen this with LLMs and things like that. So first off, have a desire. I would say that the second thing on that is sort of when you see the evolution of technology moving towards everyday use, there's an opportunity to really fall in love with problems. Right. And so whether it's tech or not is almost going to become ambiguous. It's more of where are those problems that you get excited about? I'll tell you, I'm going to this later, but Bestomer, what really sort of drive me crazy was it makes no sense the way we exchange information online, the way we shop, the way we share, the way we intrude. And not only does it bug me as a consumer, but man, small businesses are becoming they're held hostage by all of these things. And I know these people and I care about these people and they're my community. And what if we could go build a business, a big business, don't get me wrong, but one that could actually provide relief to my community and give back to me as a consumer something that I want? My energy goes through the roof. And behind that, there's AI and there's technology. But guess what? There's also accounting and sales and real estate and all these other pieces that kind of go into that. So my only point is that I think we can look at tech now more as a set of problems that are trying to be solved in the world and where we get motivation. If you're a young person looking for a career, I mean, there's a whole other conversation. But, again, I think you start, what is that thing that you just gets you excited? Again, for me, when I could learn how to do a thing and then I plugged it into a screen, and then it did what I wanted it to do, my brain just fired. Mm-hmm. Holy shit. This is the thing I want to do all the time. I think everybody needs to tap into that thing. And then where the world evolves and technology evolves, everything will have some element of artificial intelligence and technology. There's no question, right? But again, the bar is not, are you the PhD engineer anymore? It's, are you the person who can articulate and solve a problem that the world needs?
I totally agree with that. I haven't thought about it from that perspective before. So I think that, what you've just articulated is that once upon a time, it was, you've got to be good at math. You've got to get into an engineering program. You've got to get your degree in that and then go get a job. And now with the bar's lowered, and by that we mean that your access to technology is at your fingertips now. You don't have to go to these schools in order to get access to it. You actually can get certified online from your home, right? So it's easier. The barrier,
Ivy League schools, by the way.
That's right. So the barrier to entry has been reduced, right? And so I think that the real key here is, how do I put myself in a position to be exposed to these things that will offer me an entree into the space that I'm interested in? I think that's the thing college does. It puts you in this environment that you're exposed to all of these different topics, right? And then you can say, I like that, I don't like that, I do like that. And you can pursue these tracks that kind of get you connected to that future.
Refine those interests. And
exactly. So I think that's really the key now, is how do I put myself in that arena where I can be exposed to those technologies, that subject matter, the people who are interested in hiring ambitious people like myself, right?
There you go. Exactly. And that, I mean, again, the curiosity and the intensity in which you pursue these interests, I think will speak volumes to the people that you want to work with. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can just tell you, I think we've all been there in the interview. Top candidate out of a great company comes in here, and it's almost like we're trying to explain to them what we do, and we're trying to sell them on the opportunity. Then this person comes in and they're educated and they've got ideas, and they're just falling out of their seat with energy because they're just so excited to be in the room. Like, that's the person I want to work with, right? It's the person I'm going to hire. And frankly, I've learned over the years too, that like, I will take that attitude over credential and sometimes experience. Experience is a different beast, because often we want to know that you've seen mistakes, you know how to avoid them. But just having that tenacity and that intensity, and that comes with really being passionate about the problem space that you're in, right? It's really hard to fake that. And I've had to go through that in my career. And some of my hardest times have been, because I'm a pretty energetic person. I like to bring a lot of feeling to everything that I do. And when I have to apply that to something I don't believe in, man, it's corrosive to me. And so I've had to really kind of place my energy in things that I know that I can genuinely get excited about. And then I think it spreads, right? People tend to be more engaged with the things that I'm saying and that I'm pitching and that I'm trying to recruit for, when they know that I believe, and so I just think, that belief that you can apply to those things, it just make it easy on yourself. Find something you care about and you don't have to fake it.
So what I just heard you say, and correct me if I didn't get this correct, or if I didn't get this, if this is not accurate, it is, number one, having a genuine interest in that area that you are pursuing or that you're trying to get into. And then the second thing I heard you say was, when you show up to that opportunity, you have to exude a certain level of excitement about it. You should be naturally excited. And you, as the hiring manager, and I will say, I sense that as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
You said, I will hire a person who is ambitious over experience any day. And I've done it. I have people on my team that didn't have the experience that some other folks that interviewed for the same role had, but the person that I eventually hired, they showed more ambitious, they were coachable, and they had a curious interest and eagerness to learn, right? And they made that obvious to me, right?
There you go. And by the way, you can, I always say this, it's skill versus will, right? I can train you on your skill set. There are times where I need a certain bar because we're moving, or it's hard, or we have a team, but most of the time we can train you. I can't inject will into you, right? Like, you have to come with that. And I will tell you, and I've had the opportunity, and I'm one of the most proud things of my career are putting bets on people and watching them thrive. And the ones that have always just never let me down were the ones that just had that desire and that hunger. And frankly, a few that I've regretted have come down to more of an entitlement and an expectation than anything else. And so not just in what I like personally, but like the data will prove that your success. And, we were talking about sales, and I think tech sales in particular, the difference between somebody who's all in and their results and somebody who's not it's binary. Like it is. I could probably look at some of your reports and tell you where I think your most enthusiastic reps are by just looking at numbers, right? And so just again, it's reflected in your performance. And if you're not there, it's fine. I always say, like, when I was at Lucid and somebody was like, I just can't get behind this space. I'm like, you're not breaking any laws. The only thing I ask though is if you're not into it, then you got to be open with us, right? Because we deserve to have somebody in this seat who's going to be excited, And so I think it's okay to be looking for that thing, or to look at an opportunity and say, well, I'm really into FP&A. I don't really know what company X does, but like I do want to understand this, and so I'm going to just put all my energy into that. But show up with that energy and that intensity and that curiosity, and just people will return it in droves. Like it's just natural reactions from humans.
So I'm listening to this. I'm someone who just happened to be scrolling through LinkedIn, and I saw something that looked interesting. I'm still interested in getting into tech, right?
Yeah.
I'm to Sam Terrell and Will Hayes drop these gems and talk about how exciting this industry is. I'm coming. Like,
yeah.
What am I doing? Am I sending a LinkedIn message to Will hey, Will, can I talk to you? Like, what do I do? Like,
so that's a really good question. And first off, never hesitate to send that note. Worst thing is they don't reply. But let's there's two avenues. Let's say there's sort of a person who is kind of coming through college and trying to figure out their first job, and there's a lot of people that are transitioning out of other jobs, right? So I would talk about it both from like, what is a good entry point depending on your background, and then how I think you can show up. So first off, just to close on the showing up, just like we said before, in any situation, I'll just give a simple, whether this is like the type of tip we're looking for, but the more interest and curiosity you show, the more attractive you will be to any hiring manager. So what do I mean by that? Is that you're coming into a company like HashiCorp or Bestomer or Lucidworks. First off, just do your background, do your research, right? When you show up to that meeting, especially at kind of like an entry level role where maybe our expectations aren't super high, and you understand our market and our competition, and you have questions about how are we thinking about adoption in this part of the market? I see we do really well in retail. I'm curious how that applies. That level of curiosity and inquiry, it leaves an impression on a hiring manager in a way. And if you are somebody that requires a little bit of a bet, you're not a guaranteed, you're not just like an obvious hire on paper, demonstrating that curiosity and that ability to go find the interesting questions goes a tremendous way. And that's probably in any situation. People who are professionals at things, they tend to like feel proud of it. They tend to like it. And so by showing interest in that, you're showing interest in them, you get a positive reaction, right? So in any, you could be going to a dinner party and meeting somebody new, and as long as you know their background, you have some questions about their career, they're going to talk to you all day and they're going to love you, because when they leave, they feel good, right? It's the same thing in these interviewing situations. But that part aside, like breaking in, there are a number of areas that I don't think people fully appreciate. I think sales is a great one around business development, right? You talk about just your ability to have some grit, to have some understanding, and to start just flexing muscle, right? Just doing the work. And what I have found, and especially in kind of the BDR, SDR, is that, again, that attitude and that commitment, it performs way better than any level of experience that anybody could bring, because every place is slightly different. Yes, it's important that you understand how a sales funnel works, but I could probably teach you that in a couple of days. Whatever experience you have at Technology X, unless we're like a direct competitor, probably doesn't transfer without some kind of onboarding or some kind of education. So I can check that box for everybody. Yeah. Your ability to start hitting phones, hitting LinkedIn, thinking outside the box, figuring out that this person's out of the office, but I got a new email and I'm going to go follow up with this person over here. All of that sort of drive, that you either have it or you bring it or you don't bring it. I shouldn't say you have it or you don't. You bring it or you don't bring it. And so by simply just bringing that, you have an opportunity to excel. And so again, some of these areas on the technical side, just to wrap this up really quick, I do think things like testing and QA are really important. I'm really interested to see where AI, especially because now we have to start refining results. And I think that just having human beings in the middle of those loops who understand domains is really important. And so not giving enough of a direct answer here, but I think there are a lot of ways, but start with that problem set, do a little bit of your research, and then start reaching out to people and be informed. And I think you'd be surprised how far you can get by just following those couple of steps.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Putting yourself in the place that those people are, right? is really important. I'll give you an example of that. Last year, I was invited to attend Afrotech. We had a contingency from HashiCorp that was sponsoring. The Blacksmiths was among the groups. We were there. We had a very small booth. We were amazed. There were over 100,000 people of color there in our business. I've never seen, I laugh. I've said before, it was like Wakanda for tech. It was just, brown-skinned folks and people from underrepresented groups everywhere. And it was an amazing thing. They took over downtown Austin. There was a young man that came by our booth. I was out walking the floor, and he was, looking to, extend his career. He'd had one role in tech. He was in between jobs. I came back to the booth. People were like, "You got to talk to this young man." Like our entire booth was buzzing. And he was prepared. He came prepared. I had a very engaged conversation with him, and he just showed grit. He invested in himself to get there. Right. And that's a big thing in and of itself, right? To figure out, like, how can I get in there where these employers are? And long story short, we hired him, and he's now at HashiCorp, and now I'm happy that he's actually in our SDR roles. And just for folks that are on the call, SDR and business development rep is more like an entry-level sales position. If you've got 5 years or so of experience, they might have you in an SDR role to see how you perform there, and then move you up to other roles where you have more responsibility. So that's the one thing that I would add. Make the investment in yourself. Put yourself in the place. If you're fishing, go to where the fish are. Right. That's it.
Yeah. And that just validates kind of what we've been talking about, right? I mean, just that impression that young person could leave by just simply being engaged, right? Having fun perspectives there. And again, I mean, this whole just when you say bet on yourself, right? I think that is probably the most important thing. And what that means is not just like okay, I'm betting on myself. No, invest in myself, do the work, right? But understand that, like, that's where the most return is going to come from, right? It's going to come from that time that you put internally in your own learning and understanding, and just out there obtaining information will pay back tenfold. So,
right.
So we might have some questions.
Yeah.
Switch to that. Yeah,
I did. So I wanted to ask you, there are a couple things that you're involved with.
I'll give a quick plug.
yeah, let's do some plugs right
conversation
now.
Though, yeah.
So the folks can know all the exciting stuff. So you were CEO and president of Lucidworks.
Yeah.
You've gone on to co-found another organization called Bestomer. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, what you're doing there, and then there's a foundation that you're a part of. 10,000.
Yeah. I'll just give a couple quick plugs, and then so I'm working with a really great team. A lot of us early ex-Splunk folks, including one of the founders actually, on a company called Bestomer. I mentioned a little bit earlier, our goal is to do something pretty dramatic in terms of just like a transformation across the industry. We feel that the proliferation of just spam and ads and tracking, it's gotten to this point where it's so corrosive in the relationships that we have with companies. And when we started to talk to companies, what we found was that they feel trapped, right? They're stuck in this paradigm. And so what we're doing is we're completely reimagining it. We want to put tools in the hands of the consumers to make sure that as a consumer, I have some collaboration, I have a seat at the table. And our belief is that by leveraging and enabling more of the consumer control, that we create an arena in which businesses can much easier come in and engage. And it's a lot less friction. It's a lot less of passing private information. It's a lot less security risk, and it's far more intentional. And so we just envision a world where, hey, I've got businesses that I know and I love. They don't need to spam me. They don't need to track me. And in fact, I know the moment I need something, they're willing to come in and engage me, and we want to build a platform for them. And so that's what we're doing. And, again, it's on the surface, but underneath, I can tell you just the acceleration in which, like, computer vision and LLM and entities and just all the things that we're seeing it's pretty wild. So we're pretty excited there. Another quick plug, and I want to get to the questions. Part of an organization called 10,000 Degrees. 10,000 Degrees is a Bay Area-based organization. We work with low-income students in the Bay Area going to college, through college. Organization started offering financial and really what I call emotional support. So we help kids with senior year financial aid, making sure that gets renewed, making sure that they have everything in place, as well as scholarships. We help distribute about $32 million worth of scholarships to Bay Area students. I just joined the executive board. Something we're doing is starting to bolster our corporate programs. Two areas that I would love for anybody on this call to get involved. One, and we posted a link, just launched our career mentorship program. Everybody is welcome to come mentor our kids. These kids are ambitious, they are motivated, and a lot of times they just need exposure and access to folks like yourself. And so we would love to have you involved. Super small commitment. You fill out a profile. It could be as little as like 1 hour a quarter. Somebody just wants to get on a call with you. And so definitely would love to have participation. We're also launching intern programs. And so to the extent that you have internships at your company that you'd love to partner with, connect with me. Happy to share more. But we're really excited. And again, just the impact. I came through a program like this, putting a lot of effort into West Contra Costa, where I grew up, and would encourage anybody to get involved. But thanks for the plug. And I want to make sure we do get the question.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You got me on that list. I will happily.
I appreciate you.
I love this kind of stuff. So
yeah. And it's easy. We try to make it. You're a busy guy. You've got a lot going on. We want to make it where you can just drop some nuggets, engage a student, and trust me, like those are transformational experiences for them. And we try to minimize your time as much as possible.
No, absolutely. That's what gives me juice. I find it very motivating. So absolutely. All right. We got a question from Kelvin. Have a question. What level of company would you advise an advanced beginner, early to intermediate in tech to join? Is it a startup, or should he or she look for opportunities in big companies?
Oh man, this is again, I feel like my answer to this would change, like just based on the environment. So let me just maybe break it down two ways. I believe that larger companies are great ways to learn foundational experience, right? Because when we're in a startup, a lot of times it's game time decision, right? And it's important, I think, to know what good process is. What scalable operations and repeatable operations look like. And if you grow up just in a startup, you lose some of that. And I've gone through my own experiences to kind of have to bolster some of that. So I do think big companies are good. Here's the challenge with a big company. They get lots of people coming in, lots of people that want to work there. They have programs that go out into universities. So if you're not coming through a traditional channel, it can be difficult. Now, does that mean you shouldn't apply? I would absolutely encourage people. Startups are twofold, a little different. One, you could probably get a hold of the CEO and, like we said before, write them a heartfelt letter of why you believe in their business and their vision and what they're doing and why you want to be a part of it, and you'll probably get a call. So there's always an entry point. The thing that a startup, though, for your career, what it does is that it does not limit you into a role. I think one of the things that I've witnessed that's sort of unfortunate as a leader, as the company is successful, we tend to put more constraints on people, right? Because we have more resources. So when you're at a startup, it's very common to wear multiple hats, good and bad. Good side, if you're young, you're ambitious, you got time, you can just absorb 20 years worth of experience in less than 5. And I mean that. And I mean 20 years of like real hard on my resume, things that I can trade for in my career, like no question. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be a lot of time. You won't always have the support and the structure, and you'll need to go figure it out. So if you have the type of person in your life, young person, child, friend, who does well in some unstructured, but is highly motivated and will always take opportunity, I think they will thrive in a startup environment. I think that energy will come across when they reach out, when they start to have the interview, and I highly encourage it. If you're someone that's a little more structured and you really like to have things at a more understood pace and you really want to have really intentional structure around you, then obviously the big company experience is going to be better for you. But I just, I guess I'll go ahead and just say it. I think as a younger person, if you have the time and the effort, if you can get in and you can work hard, I don't think you will regret the 5+ chaotic years that you invest to experience 20 years of big company experience. I mean that.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I agree with that completely. I think you're going to get exposure to a lot of things in a startup, right? And you'll have the greatest opportunity to move up quickly, right? As that organization becomes more successful and you're proving yourself. Whereas it's with a larger company, you can get lost sometimes in that. The other piece that people don't talk about, and I think it's ample for another conversation, is like there's typically there's a really good equity play with startups.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
We need to educate some folks on that. That's what, in addition to the tech and falling in love with that, there's a tremendous amount of upside that you can purchase.
And it's funny because I do find, and I notice this, especially as I leave the Bay and get across, a lot of folks, especially people of color, don't realize this, right? And so I have seen highly talented people kind of tucked away in, like if you're in Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. Like Home Depot, Coca-Cola, E-Trade, like these are just like, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're a software engineer and you make it in one of those companies, like you're kind of at the top of the food chain. And, for someone like me who shows up in Alpharetta, Georgia, and I see somebody who's a ninja with the dev, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you should be like, helping build some of the next generation of stuff. And by the way, that has changed now. And so I think the geographic distribution of startup, one with just the COVID and the work from home, I'm still very much biased towards the Bay Area as being the central innovation hub, separate conversation. But I will say that those opportunities didn't always exist in places like Georgia or even New York City for that matter. And now there's a lot more. So, you can take advantage. But yes, the equity upside, there's no question. I mean, it could be life-changing in a number of cases. And if you get the right one, it doesn't require a whole lot to even get going. So
that's it. You only need one. One. With maybe 7 minutes left, I don't see, if we get more questions, we will ask them. And Will, you've dropped a number of gems, jewels, nuggets, whatever you want to call them on this call. Like, I hope folks were at home or in their office, wherever you happen to be, taking notes, because there was a lot of knowledge dropped on this call today. If you could go back in a time machine, not calling you old, but you got gray like me.
A little bit.
The old Will talking to the young Will, right? What would you tell young Will as he's starting out in his career?
And again, it's this whole experience around identity and imposter, right? There's part of me that just wants to go back and say, bro, you're good. Like, don't worry about it so much, But again, I think so much of that shaped me, right? I do think, and this is something that I've always been very blessed in the sense that, like, I've had a lot of support for whatever my gut feel, whether it was coming from my family or now, my wife and that. And I think that there's something in just, really follow your gut, your internal compass, right? I think there's times where we allow these competing. I never should have left school, right? And then I got into Genentech. And I got a full-time job and I was comfortable. And this is a company where people work for 30, 40 years and retire and they're happy. And I never should have left Genentech for Splunk. And I did. And then I never should have left Splunk for Lucidworks. And I did. But at every moment, my gut just said, no, this is right. And all these other reasons to stay at Splunk because of the equity and the upside and the golden handcuff. But I wasn't that happy, right? Company was big. It wasn't very, all those reasons that I had to do the right thing based on what we're sort of taught just felt wrong. And I say that it's sort of an obvious thing, but I tell you, I'm surrounded by people every day that are not following their gut and their desire, and they're in situations, and it's corrosive to their well-being and their mental health and their relationships. And so to the extent that you can just continue to believe in that, I think I've been lucky that I've done it, but I've questioned it the whole time. And then the other piece is just my number one thing, and always reach for this, is curiosity. Right. I believe that we get ourselves either in a defensive mode or a creator mode, above the line, below the line. I can share some assets on kind of how I model that. But the moment we lose curiosity, we close doors. Right. And that can be about a situation or a conflict or thinking about career or thinking about transition. And so I really need to encourage people to just sort of tap into that. And I think there were times when I didn't necessarily lean on that, and it sort of helped me in a stasis. And then I look at every moment where I got super curious and I got super creator, and it always accelerated. And so I think just kind of reminding myself of that first and foremost, right? It's just like, look, you can just absorb, and you're going to be good.
That is fantastic. It's some additional jewels to grow on. I think we would all go back and tell our younger selves something to that effect.
Be a little more open-minded.
Yeah, in this space, right? Because it's challenging because the diversity numbers are so low, and when we look around these rooms, we're the only ones in there, right? And we also don't have the support groups. Like, it's not like, our parents and our parents' parents were, in this sphere before. So often it becomes difficult, particularly like if you work in a startup, right? Because if you land a job at Coca-Cola or Home Depot and you're a developer there, you have made it, right, in some of these areas.
Precisely, yeah.
Your family looks at you like you got a third horn growing out of your head. And you say, I'm going to go work for this startup. First of all, they think startups have no money.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And, your odds of being unemployed in 2 years, they perceive as being very high. Not that you're getting all this experience, and all those experiences is transferable, right? You just parlay that into a bigger role at another company. So, those are the things that we really need to internalize and really need to analyze. Like, look, I'm as good, I'm better because I've experiences that nobody at this table or nobody in this room
Precisely
has been through. That gives me an advantage.
And I'll say, I mean, it's been a topic for a long time, whether it's adversity or, this term of meritocracy is one that I really, really challenge, because here's the thing, right? We have defined meritocracy specifically in the Silicon Valley around a certain set of criteria. Oh, they went to Stanford. Oh, they did this. They launched this thing. They're sort of GitHub. Where is the merit as a first-time college student in your family? Where's the merit of completing school while supporting your family? Where's the merit of having a single parent household where you have to play a parent and take care of your sibling? I'm sorry. And I don't mean this from a social justice. Like, we can talk about it all day long. I'm talking about straight experience and grit and ownership and capability. And so we tend to not value those things as much. And it's to a detriment, because let's go full circle back to what we said earlier. Who are the folks that we want to invest in? Who are the folks that outperform? It's the ones who bring that grit, right? Who can handle adversity. Adversity happens every single day in our industry. You miss a number. I miss a release. We get a rejection on a fundraise, right? I mean, there are so many things. We have an SVB crisis over the weekend, right? That affected even like friends of mine that were, we all look to as like the top of the game with the best companies, and they were panicking that weekend trying to make payroll, right? So adversity is part of this game. And so to the extent that you don't come from this background, to the extent that you're not exposed to this, really leverage what you do have. And I'll tell you, like, I mean, for me, I think growing up in an environment where we had everything from thugs and drug dealers to, the wealthy kids that I grew up with meant that like your family ran the carpet company or the construction company, and having to adapt and being mixed race. And all of these things have really just helped me in my career. And that's why when I reflect, are there things that I'd like to change? Are there things that I want to influence in our industry? Absolutely. But I have a hard time sometimes because I'm like, God, these have all become assets for me. And I want to help other people understand where their assets are. And I'm not trying to minimize challenges. And I think us as folks who are successful, Black folks in particular, we can remove barriers. We can create access. It's not our burden. We don't have to be doing it. You simply being Sam Terrell is the biggest impact to our community that we can possibly have. But to the extent that we can kind of open up and bring more folks in and help those folks understand that they're bringing tools to the table that, frankly, are what make you successful in this industry is a huge opportunity. So really excited for the future. I think there's so much good work, and I really appreciate you all creating this venue and having a chance for us to talk and to really just kind of share. And I think just more of this that we do can be transformative for all kinds of people. So
each one teach one. I love this, Will. This has been so awesome. Thank you for taking time. I know you are extremely busy. Really dropped some real serious tips on everybody. This was awesome. I expect everybody on this call to hit Will up on LinkedIn.
Please.
Send me
up for our career program.
I'm in, you get in. Well, thank you.
Really appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, folks, for joining us today. Frank, I didn't know if you had any last words to say, but
no, this was amazing. I think we need to schedule parts 2, 3. We could do a docuseries on this. No, Will, just want to thank you for your time and insights and investing in us and the whole community. Sam, as well, for an awesome conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll have more of these coming up soon. This will be loaded to YouTube, I think, in about a week or two's time, so folks can check it out and share it. But thank you so much for joining. Will, thank you again. Sam, thank you.
Kind of fun, man. Thank you so much. I'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Good.